Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I'm doing the next episode in my palette roulette series in which I review a palette that's in my collection that might also be in your collection. I utilize it for a week or so and then I come to you. I talk to you about the good, the bad, the ugly with the palette, show you some swatches, some pictures, and then we pick another palette and we do it all over again. I hope that sounds like something you're interested in. It's not always about the brandest new palette out there. As a matter of fact, it's more about getting some use out of the palettes that I have in my collection and getting more familiar with the palettes that I have in my collection. And today we will be reviewing the Tartelette in Bloom and the ADEPT Cosmetics NINHYDRIN palette. And I do have some thoughts on both these palettes, so I hope that you'll want to keep watching. For those of you new here, hi, my name is Donna. I'm a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a field leader for Ulta Beauty. I get a lot of education in my position. I like to bring you that education here, but ultimately I'm just out here talking about makeup because I like to talk about makeup. And I think that if you're here, you probably also like to talk about makeup. So let's do that. Let's just jump in and talk about some makeup. All right, so as I sat down, I realized that when I do these videos, I take a bunch of notes, right? I'm taking notes throughout the whole process so that I can get familiar and have it written down so that I can have it written down what it is that I want to talk to you about. And I'm realizing that I didn't do that for this palette. So I really hurriedly found out how much the palette costs and what its weight is as far as a per pan, and then I'm just going to talk you through some of the shades. But I think the real mammer jammer, the real reason why we're here today is because of this palette here, because everybody knows about Tarte and Tarte's formulations, right? Maybe not everybody knows about this palette. So this is where I'm going to start today. This is the ADEPT Cosmetics NINHYDRIN palette. This is a $57 eyeshadow palette. It has 1.32 ounces of product in it. That means there are 0.11 ounces of product in each one of these 12 eyeshadow pans, which is crazy sauce. That's a lot bigger than most eyeshadow palettes. Well, to put it into perspective, the pans in this palette are 0.05 ounces. The packaging of this is a really nice magnetic packaging with removable pans, which I thought was amazing. What I love about it is it's got this faux leather feel to it, and this NINHYDRIN piece is raised, and it's also like oil slicky as far as the look of the metal goes, but it is like metal or maybe hard plastic, I'm not sure. But it's very sleek. There's nothing on it except for this that says NINHYDRIN, right? So really pretty packaging. Reminds me a lot of Natasha Denona of old, where it was like a leather wrapped, foam palette. The only difference is this isn't foam, this is cardboard. So when you open it up, it does have a mirror on it, which is great. It does fold all the way back, which is also great. And this is what the shadows look like. So I think that you can see that a lot of these shadows look like I dug into them a lot. That's not necessarily the case. This palette has 12 shades. There are 2 mattes and the rest are duo or multi-chromes. It is a vegan, talc-free, glitter-free, and BHT-free. I don't know what that even is. And cruelty-free eyeshadow palette, which I think is fantastic. And I think maybe you might be able to see some shifting going on in this palette. Maybe not. I didn't take the plastic off the mirror, so that's not helping, I don't think. This is a beautiful palette, and as I said, it only has 2 mattes, this one here and this one here. This one over here is like a plum. It is the matte that's in, or one of the mattes that's in my eye look today, and I love it. It's kind of like this grayish plum, and this other one is a really olive green. I feel like these 2 mattes do go really, really well with the entirety of the shades in the palette, but what I wish was there was just maybe one more matte in here that was a lighter shade. I do think that I love the fact that there are 10 multi-chromes or shadows in here that are intense, shimmery, like multi or duochrome shadows. But I do think we would have benefited from one lighter shade than these two mattes in here if they were only going to give us two mattes. The matte formula is really nice. It's creamy, it's buttery soft to the touch, and in use, I felt like it just glided onto my eye without there being any kinds of problems. Almost felt cream to powdery, but it's definitely not. You can definitely feel just the powder nature of it when you put it onto your skin, but it feels to the touch like it might be a little bit more moist than a regular matte. So a little bit more creamy than a regular matte. The other thing that I would say about those two mattes is that in the pan, they're very dusty. Like when you put your brush into them, it does kick up quite a lot of powder. But as you're putting it on your skin, there is no fallout, which typically with colors of these nature, you know, kind of dark grungy colors, you do see quite a bit of fallout from them. And I didn't find that these fell out at all, which I was pleasantly surprised by. Now, the shimmer formula in this palette, I think, is what everybody's here for. In this palette is going to be super hard to show you because even though it's cardboard packaging, it's like a reflective purple cardboard packaging, so like an iridescent look, so it's kind of too reflective almost, and I feel like that's part of the reason why we can't really see some of the shifting that's done on it. But the formula, the reason why it looks like I have attacked these pans is because the formula of this palette is very, very malleable. It would be super easy to go too hard and dig right down into the bottom of these pans, I do feel like. Even just touching them, just slightly touching them, you can see the imprint of my finger, and I didn't go hard in that palette. There's not hardly anything on my finger. So if you do have these palettes, or if you get one of their palettes with all these beautiful like dual multi-chromes, just be really careful when you go into the shadow, especially if you're going in with something other than, well, especially when you're going in with your finger, be careful of how much pressure you're putting behind your finger. But if you're going in with a brush and you really can't feel like the pressure that's on the tip of that brush that's in this shadow, you could cause havoc with the shadows that you have here. What I was pleasantly surprised about was that this palette has no glitter, even though it looks like it has a ton of glitter. The shadows look like they have a ton of glitter, but there's not that like grippy feel of a glitter or even a glitter byproduct or synthetic glitter. I'm sure it has synthetic. I don't know for sure, but I'm sure it does have some sort of synthetic glitter in it, but eye safe glitter, if you will. But I think that it is fantastic that it doesn't have glitter in it to make it as sparkly beautiful as it is. But while I love this palette and all of the beauty that it created in an eye look, I also hate it because it irritated my eyes so bad. I don't think that I have ever felt the amount of irritation. It makes me so sad. I will continue to use this palette. It is on my eyes today. I will continue to use it because it is beautiful. But I don't think I have felt the amount of eye irritation from an eyeshadow as much as I did from these. And it makes me so sad. With that said, even after taking the eyeshadow off of my eyes, I could still go to sleep and wake up in the morning and my eyes would be super crusty feeling and just puffy from having worn these eyeshadows. It makes me so sad. I think a lot of that is because whatever is going on in those eyeshadows did fall out quite a bit. Fall into my lash line, fall into my eyes from my lash line. Throughout the day, I didn't find that they fell out at all as long as I was wearing a glitter glue, but if I didn't wear glitter glue at all, I was toast. I ended up taking these shadows off at about the 6 or 7 hour mark almost every single day just because they were bothering my eyes that much. And it just makes me so sad. So this palette, and probably the plain Jane that I still have in there because I bought 2 at a time, is going to have to go into my special places kind of category where I can wear it, but I can only wear it for special occasions. Maybe I'm only recording for the day and I wear it for the day and that is it. Maybe I'm going to a party and that is it. Who am I kidding? I'm almost 50. I'm definitely not going to parties, but it's going to have to become my special occasion palette because man, my eyes were so irritated by this palette. As a matter of fact, the blue that I have on my eyes right now is the shade here. And I even put on a shimmer from this palette because I was like, I'm leaving tonight. I'm driving up to a hotel and staying in a hotel with my son. He's got to be at the airport at 5:30 in the morning. It's about an hour away as the crow flies, but in the morning with the traffic, it would be about 2 hours. So we're staying in a hotel tonight, and I don't want to have to drive with the irritation that this brings to my eyes. So I wasn't going to put it on, but this is barely tapped on my lid, and I do see a little bit of creasing because of the shadow maybe that's underneath of it. But it also doesn't have any glitter glue underneath it because I did put a different shadow underneath of it. But I hate dark shimmers, let's be honest. Bottom line, the shadows in this palette are fantastic. The shimmers are beautiful. The mattes work so well, and I love the shades of the mattes in here. There is a little bit of staining that you see. Best performance and longevity you're going to get with the primer. With the shimmers, you need to have a glitter glue. But like longevity, I can't give you a true tea representation of what longevity looks like for these shades because every time I wore one of the shimmers in an eye look, I was taking the makeup look off at about 5 to 6 hours in, 7 at the most. So I can't give you a representation of that. True longevity for these eyeshadows looks like. The packaging, I love. I love this sleek packaging. I love the like faux leather look to it. I love that it's got removable pans. That's also fantastic. So if I didn't like all these shadows, I could just pull them out and stick them in a palette. With that said, none of these have a name to them except for this one here, which is called Ninhydrin. The other ones are just ACM, which I have to imagine means Adept Cosmetics Matte 31, ACD, Adept Cosmetics Dual Chrome 18, ACI, Adept Cosmetics Intense Shimmer 21. You know, I mean, none of them have names, so it wouldn't hurt my feelings to pop them out and put them into a magnetic palette, which is probably what I'll end up doing if I'm honest with you, especially since I won't be using this palette as a palette because I can't, because these shimmers just bother my eyes so much. So with that said, I did go into a little deeper dive into the brand because this is the first time I'm using Adept Cosmetics as a makeup brand. So Adept is an Asian owned and 100% self-funded brand, which I thought was amazing. They were established in 2017 and they're owned by a husband and wife team. They care very deeply about the planet. So this packaging here is a faux leather packaging. 40% of their packaging is upcycled, this palette included. And they use secondhand mirrors where possible. I just thought that was amazing. And it makes me love this brand even more. I wish my eyes were not so bent out of shape every single time I put one of these shimmers on my eyes. It makes me so sad. Ninhydrin is a chemical powder which is soluble in ethanol or acetone at room temp, and it is often used because it reacts with the amino acids in fingerprint residue. It's harmful if it's absorbed, but it will react by staining skin purple. So I thought that that was interesting. I thought that that was like little tidbits of information that were interesting. I don't know if that's why they named it that way, but I think it's funny because this palette is purple and a lot of the shades in here lean very purple. So with that said, let's go ahead and swatch this. I'm not going to tell you the shade names because they literally have no shade names, but I'm going to give you the two mattes first. And then we're going to run across the shimmers in the palette just the way that they are. So I'm going to put the two mattes here. This one is the kind of plummy tone one. It's very like grayish. Oh, I love it so much. And then that one is the olive toned one. Also really very pretty. And I think that when you see them coupled with the other shadows that are in this palette, you'll find that they really do go quite well with all of the like multichromes, duochromes in this palette. So now going just straight across the top. This one here, I would like to say it's very putty-like. It feels a lot like a Super Shock. And if you just like bounce your finger in it, you're actually going to get quite a bit on your finger. And there's not another one in the palette that feels quite as putty-like as that one does. Okay, so we have this one here, which is kind of this gold to pink and kind of silvery multi-chrome. Really pretty in a eye look. Then we have this one, which is a shimmery, like rose gold, I would say. This one is a multi-chrome that is green to blue to kind of a copper color. It is so pretty. Then this one, which is also multi-chrome, and this one glides super easy. This one also, I think, would be one that you could go super ham on and not even realize what you were doing. Maybe even pan it way too soon. This one is like a gold. It's got a gold shift, a purple shift, and kind of like a yellow, not maybe like an antique gold, a bright vivid yellow, and then kind of this purpley color. The bottom row has this one here, which is kind of a blue purple lilac multi-chrome. Then this one, which is in my eye look, and it is kind of a midnight blue. I don't think this one really shifts very much. I think this one was maybe an intense shimmer. It's just so pretty. Then we have this multi-chrome that is Ninhydrin. Then we have this one, which is crazy purple with like green, gold, and maybe even like a copper as well. They do stain the fingers. Okay, the last two is this one, which I think performs more like a topper. Honestly, I mean, it gives just anything that's underneath it a little bit of a like iridescence. And then we have this one, which is the green in the palette. They look similar, but they have a very different like color. I'm going to turn down my lights, but I think that you can see the two mattes do really go with everything in here. Like right now I have the purple matte and this blue on my eye look, and I think it's actually quite pretty. All right, so that was the Adept palette. Would I purchase this again? Knowing what I know now, no. If I mean, just because it bothers my eyes, and you know, sometimes you're gonna have those palettes that bother your eyes. You just have to know when you can use them, for how long you can use them, and then, you know, go from there and make a decision that's right for you. I'm still happy to own the palette. I still absolutely think it's beautiful. I still am excited to try Plain Jane, to be honest. I just know that I'm not going to get as much use out of this palette as, say, I might the Tartelette in Bloom. Is that okay with me? Yes. Would I recommend it? Sure. I would absolutely recommend it, as long as your eyes aren't maybe as sensitive as mine are. If you don't have a sensitivity issue with your eyeballs, you're probably not going to have a palette or a problem with this palette. I love this palette. I would still probably rank it up in that top category at the end of the year. You know, when I go through all the palettes that I tried this year, this will probably still come up at the top of the categories for me. I have like top, mid-tier, and then sorry I own them for the most part. Not sorry I own them, but wouldn't recommend for the most part. This will probably still end up in that top tier, but because I can't use it as often as I would others, it might be on the lower end of that top tier, but it would still come in that top tier. Another one that would come in that top tier, even though it is just a basic palette, is the Tartelette in Bloom. So at the other end of the spectrum, this is a very, very matte heavy palette. This is $45. It's very mainstream. You can get it just about anywhere. It has 12 pans of eyeshadow in it, and the pans of eyeshadow in here are half the size of the pans of eyeshadow in here. So when I bring that to you, know that yes, this palette is about $12 more than this palette is. But that palette also has a ton of multi-chromes and duochromes, and the pan size is twice what each one of the pans in here is. For me, that price point is fantastic. I know I've heard a lot of people say that the price point was too high. I don't think so, really. At the end of the day, when you get down to it, that's a really great price point. This palette here is a metal. I think this piece is a sticker on top of a metal package, and the front of the palette looks like this, and the back of the palette just is gold with all the reflection, and just has this little small area that it tells you about the palette in. It says Tartelette in Bloom on the front, and then you open it up and it does have a nice mirror. The mirror does stand up on itself. It will not bend back on itself. It is a metal palette, so you can use this as like a vanity if you go out of town and you need a vanity, so to speak. These are the eyeshadows in this palette. Like, I will be the first to tell you, this is not a Donna palette. This is a plain Jane palette. It's not really colorful. It's not something that people would be used to seeing me in, to be honest, but it is something that I've been steering towards a lot over the last several months. I've found that I just really love a simple neutral brown eyeshadow look. It goes really well with my brown eyes, and it looks more my age, I guess, if I was going to be an ageist out here. With that said, these are 12 very, very easy eyeshadows to use. Not because of the color, because actually even these light ones over here, have a whole lot more pigmentation to them than you would expect looking at this palette, but because they are just so finely milled, so beautiful, no fallout. There's not even any kind of mess in the pan. They blend perfectly. It's like not even having to be blend. So really, really great shadows. I think where Tarte fails us, honestly, is their shimmers, and I don't feel any differently about this palette than I feel about any other Tarte palette. I think the best shimmers that I've seen from Tarte came in the Tarte Maneater After Dark palette, but that's not one of my favorite palettes. These shimmers are probably ranks right up there with some of the worst. But I also feel like that's most of what Tarte's shimmers look like. And there are only 3 of them in this palette. So at the end of the day, I'm getting, 8 shadows in this palette that I love and that I will use and that I will continue to use. This black is actually more of a charcoal, and this like kind of deep brown performs more like a black. Which I think is very strange, but these are very, very good shadows. I'm going to swatch them for you. I didn't do a whole lot of deep dive into these, but I'm not going to like put them out on my hands for you. I'm going to just show you. This is the first row here This shimmer was what was on my eye look today that I went over the top of with the blue, because it was just a really bad shimmer. Like, in my humble opinion, Tarte's powders or Tarte shimmers are so powdery that they exacerbate all the texture on your eyes because they're trying to be a shimmer but performing like a satin matte-ish, so to speak. They're just not great shimmers. I really did love this white. This white would be like probably my favorite in this palette because it's just stark, it's beautiful, it's great for blending out, it's great for inner corner. This is the black that I told you was more like a charcoal. I think that you can see that. It's not a great black, but it is a great charcoal. And it's a really great eyeshadow to use in an eye look. I think it goes on really, really well and super easily. No fallout. I think I said that. And these perform really, really well, whether you're wearing a primer or no. I think that they could potentially be a little bit ashy if you are, you know, of a deeper skin tone. But I think that we all know that about Tarte, so I don't think that I'm telling you anything new. Like, Tarte isn't the best when it comes to inclusivity. So these are the next set of 4. I think even though they look very similar, this one and that black, this one is actually darker than the other black. It just has a little bit of an espresso kick to it. A really light, like kind of beigey color, a midpoint color, a shimmer, and then a dark deepening out. With that said, like, I'm sure that you've guessed it by now if you didn't know, like, movement across the rows for Tarte is an eye look. So you could easily go row by row and have yourself 3 different eye looks. You could also do like just one and done eyeshadow looks with this, and you would find that everything looks really well together. Here is the last row. This one being the shimmer, this one here being the shimmer. This shimmer is actually a really pretty shimmer, but it's very gold. It's super pretty. But I'm just not a gold person, and you can see that this one is more of your warm toned row. I really loved this shade here. I also really loved this shade here. This shade is also in my eye look today. It is just kind of the one that I used to buff out the purple shade because it kind of has this pink feel to it. It's a really pretty palette. It's a really pretty palette. Well, it's a really beautiful formula and an everyday palette. I don't find anything wrong with this palette. I also don't find anything like amazing about this palette. I think that this palette is just a meh palette. Would it end up, where would it end up in my ranking at the end of the year? I would say that because of the color story of it, it would end up in the mid-range, but it would definitely be high mid-range because it is an everyday palette. I could pick this up and be 100% solid in the look that I was going after and knowing that it would come out exactly how I wanted it to work. I used this a lot during the last couple weeks because of, for just all matte eyeshadow looks, and I loved it. I don't love Tarte shimmers, so when I wanted a shimmer to go on the lid, I would absolutely pull from the NINHYDRIN palette. With that said, you guys, I didn't take very many pictures. Because the NINHYDRIN palette was often the palette that was on my lid space, and because it drove my eyes as bonkers as it did, I found that almost immediately my eyes were watering or they were itchy, and I was constantly touching my eyes. You might have seen it in some of the videos that I have uploaded lately. I didn't take very many pictures. I think I have like 3 or 4. By the end of the day, or by the time I remembered to take a picture, I still had an eye look to look at. So there's that. But I would just tell you, either one of these palettes, for this one, you have to not have sensitive eyes, but either one of these palettes would be a palette that I would suggest to anybody. Tarte has a formula that I always suggest when it comes to somebody coming into the makeup field that is new to makeup. It's always been a formula that I have suggested and recommended in those moments because Tarte is just easy to use. I would also say that about the ADEPT Cosmetics eyeshadows. I would love to see a all matte palette from them, because those mattes were pretty amazing. But I know that they are so well known for their multi-chromes that that'll probably never happen. So with that said, let's go pick up a new palette. I will be right back. Okay, so because I went ahead and tortured my eyes for weeks, I'm gonna go back to my roots, what I know works, what I love. Another reason why I'm doing this is because I'm going out of town and I want to make sure that I have ease of use in my eyeshadow looks, because it's a work trip and I'm not going to have a whole lot of time. I'm going to California. I'm super excited about it, but I'm not going to have a whole lot of time to mess around, right? And hotel lighting is awful. Let's just be honest. So I'm going to pull in the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude palette. You know, when I was digging into my palettes, I haven't done a palette roulette on yet. I still have the Natasha Denona My Dream in there, and I still have the Natasha Denona Glam, Retro Glam. But this is the one that I want to pull in. I've used both of those. I should maybe just pull them out of there because I've used both of them in a get ready with me standpoint, but I haven't reviewed them. So I feel some sort of way, but I really want to try this palette, and it is another one of those just plain Jane palettes, but I'm gonna see how we feel about this one at the end of the day. And I know that these shimmers are not going to bother my eyes as much as the ADEPT Cosmetics one does. I think I might take some singles with, no, I'm not gonna do it. I'm just gonna use this palette. This is a palette that I can see myself maybe getting a little bit bored of. I just want to be kinder to my eyes. I just want a palette that I know that I love and I trust, and then I know that my skin and my eyes also love, that my face isn't sensitive to, my skin's not sensitive to. So that is the palette that I'm choosing for this next palette roulette. I know it's, you know, kind of newish, but it's also pretty old. There's already a lot of reviews out there. I haven't watched any of them. When it comes to palettes that I know I'm going to end up reviewing, I don't typically watch reviews of them until after I've made up my own mind. With that said, I hope that it's a palette that you're interested in watching. And if so, please don't forget to subscribe so that you are apprised of all of the videos that I post. I do post Monday, Wednesday, and Friday here, but my palette roulettes come on a Wednesday, but it's like sporadic Wednesdays. They used to be every week, but man, I was so busy, and I had to quit doing that. So with that said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope that you enjoyed the video. What are your thoughts on the palettes that I just reviewed? I'm sure many of you have experience with Tartelette and Bloom, but do any of you have experience with the ADEPT Cosmetics eyeshadows? I know that several of you out there, this is your favorite eyeshadow formula, and to be honest, I understand why. It just bothers my eyes, so I'm not going to be able to make it a favorite in my humble opinion, but I really do love me some multi-chromes in that palette. Do you have the Natasha Denona I Need a Nude? I would love to hear your thoughts and opinions based on just your use so far with the palette. Thank you guys so much again for joining me today. I hope that you and yours are well. I hope that you are all safe and healthy and getting along as best you can. And I hope that you are all loving each other, but loving each other from afar. And until next time, bye friends.